Hi, my name is Sean Shaler. You probably recognize me from my lack of success on the semi-professional belching circuit. But I won't be belching today. Instead, I'm here to ask you for your help. For just a few dollars per game, you can save an Atari 7800. The Atari 7800 has wallowed in forgettableness since its first kind of launch in 1984, then its actual launch in 1986. But recently, I reached out and saved an Atari 7800 of my very own, and I've fallen in love with it. I know what you're thinking. Why should I save an Atari 7800? A console that outputs RF audio video, that has such terrible wonky controllers, whose games behave an awful lot like Atari 2600 games. But please, just give me a few moments of your time to explain how you can get the most out of your Atari 7800. And, in return, what saving an Atari 7800 can do for you. Let's start with the RF audio video out. If you don't want that, it's simple. Just go find an old VCR and run it through there to get glorious composite out. I'm not actually sure the VCR does anything to the output quality, but it's way better than the RF straight to the old television, which I couldn't get to work at all. Just check out this stunning side-by-side comparison. Now your Atari 7800 can sit next to all its composite out peers. Hello there, Mr. Nintendo Wii. And Mom, thanks for all those times you asked me if I'd ever need the VCR again. And what about those awful controllers, of which I don't even have one to show you? For these, you actually have several options. You can use your 2600 controller and concise all the complexities of 2 buttons down to a single button. Or you can use a Genesis controller, which does the same thing using only the B button, which is my preferred mode. Impress your friends and family to the max with a Sega Genesis 6-button controller, because nothing says luxurious and techy quite like a bunch of excess unused buttons. Seriously though, go with the Genesis controller. The D-pad on this thing is perfect for 7800 games. This setup works 100% effectively for about half the games in the library, and you still can't actually play the other half without a second button. Sorry. As for the games feeling like amped up Atari 2600 ports, well, that's kind of the idea. Just pretend you're playing an Atari 2600 instead of a 7800, and you'll probably be impressed instead of disappointed. It's just that easy. I've taken the liberty of picking out 5 cheap games that don't suck to show you. At least I don't think they suck. Relative to the rest of the library, of course. Remember, you can actually play anything from the massive 2600 library on here too. And these days, most of those games are super cheap. And some of them you might even find enjoyable. Or maybe not, I really don't know. But it doesn't matter, because today we're looking at the 7800 library, which, despite its small size, it has a chunk of high quality, low cost games that deserve to be in a nice home right next to an Atari 7800. So get out your pocket change and let me show you what saving a 7800 can do for you. Ms. PacMan is an extremely good version of an arcade game. The 2600 version actually wasn't bad either, especially given how bad the original PacMan game was on the 2600. But the 7800 version was a really good demonstration of how arcade-accurate games could be on this system. It's one of the most iconic games on the system, one of the most popular, fortunately for everybody, one of the cheapest as well. I actually don't have a lot of love for Ms. PacMan or PacMan in any sense. It's more of a genre thing. It kind of exacerbates my biggest weaknesses with a controller in my hand. But that's okay, all personal preferences aside. I easily give it 4 out of 5 stars and recommend it to nearly every single 7800 owner. The few minor things holding this game back are just that it's not aesthetically very impressive at all in terms of the sights and the sounds, and there's also like a bajillion other ways to play PacMan games. Those are things that are irrelevant in 1984, but in today's market do play a role, especially in comparison to some of the other games on the system and today's list. But hey, 4 out of 5 stars, that's no slouch. This is a great game. Dig Dug shares a very similar story to Ms. Pac-Man in that it's a port of an older arcade game that works very well on the 7800. It's in a similar-ish maze game kind of genre, and it's very inexpensive and extremely popular for the 7800. I personally like this game way more than Ms. Pac-Man, and the series better than the Pac-Man series overall. I think this game feels more free and open. I really appreciate that there's a lot of color going on in the backgrounds, that there's background music playing the entire time, which is something you don't see on a lot of 7800 games, and think it's just generally more impressive overall. I teetered on the fence between a 4 and a 5, but I'm going to go ahead and give it 4 stars. With similar limitations to Ms. Pac-Man in that you can play it just about everywhere, and that it's not everyone's favorite genre in this day and age. Again, it's not something I'm particularly good at, but it is in my top 5 favorite 7800 games of all time. Technically, Xevious might be the most impressive game on this list. It is a vertical scrolling shooter where the screen actually does scroll despite all the backgrounds, and it does so very smoothly. You can move your ship freely around the screen, and you can fire on 2 planes. Maybe the most interesting part to me is that if you're using a 7800 controller, each button controls a different shot, one in the air and one on the ground. But if you're using a 2600 controller or a Genesis controller, the single button fires both simultaneously. The backgrounds are bright, the background music is constant, it's all very good and impressive. Unfortunately, this game as a whole just doesn't feel as good as some of the other ones we're going to talk about. It is impressive, but I guess it's just not that interesting. It's still a really good game and a good demonstration of what the 7800 can handle. It's just not one that I'm going to recommend to quite as many people. That means it gets 3 out of 5 stars. I'm really sorry, Xevious. I appreciate what you did here, but 3 out of 5 ain't bad. And did I mention it's really cheap? I really wish I had a better understanding of why I like Galaga so much. I understand it's just a basic fixed shooter that's so much like Galaxian and every other Galaga game out there. But for some reason I've spent more time with this game than probably any other 7800 game. I pretty much enjoy it in all its iterations, and while I'm by no means good at it, it is one of the shooters at which I've gotten a little more comfortable over the years. I'm very aware that it's not aesthetically interesting or impressive or anything like that, but it does have a lot of name recognition and history going for it. So I'm going to give it 4 out of 5 stars. I personally would play this miles before Xevious, but if you go the other direction, I certainly wouldn't blame you. Still, if I look in your 7800 collection and don't see this game, I'm going to have a lot of questions for you. Food Fight is like the killer app of the 7800, if there is such a thing. It's really not all that impressive when you soak it in. There's not a ton to look at or listen to. The gameplay doesn't feel particularly mind-boggling, but what's here is all very crisp and very well done, and it's very unique in a couple of ways. First of all, there are very few other venues in which to play this game. Second, I'm having a really hard time thinking of games like this on any system. It's just fun, unique, addictive, and I had a really hard time putting the controller down. Quite frankly, it made me feel like a kid having a food fight, but without the mess and the waste. I definitely give this game a 5-star rating. That's right, 5 stars. That's amazing! I wish it were a little more impressive, but I cannot think of a single 7800 game more deserving of 100% recommendation for any 7800 owner than this one. It's a hair more expensive, but it's absolutely worth it. Seriously, you can throw food in like 8 directions, and this is another one that feels really good with the Genesis D-pad. Believe it or not, there are even more games that don't suck than the 5 I've mentioned right here. I've got games like Tower Toppler, Centipede, and Robotron 2084 on my own personal wish list, because I think they can bring my 7800 in me even closer together, without costing me too much, of course. There are also a few honorable mentions like Choplifter and Pole Position 2 that I do have, and I'm sure are fine games, but they actually require 2 buttons, so for now they just make my collection look bigger and make me feel like a better person just for owning them. But this isn't about how great I am. This is supposed to be about you, humbling yourself to support a cause that I care about a lot, for reasons, some of them good. So please, save an Atari 7800. I quickly fell in love with mine, and I think with a lot of time, energy, a gigantic old TV, and just a little money for games, you'll grow to tolerate yours as well. Console's kind of expensive though. Hey, thanks for watching. If you won't help save a 7800, no biggie. I imagine it's just that you're saving your money to give to the Children's Miracle Network, that big, highly efficient charitable organization I talk about a lot. They help millions of children and their families every single year. I give them 5 out of 5 stars, and would highly recommend.